My ex-wife gave a promotion to her deadbeat boyfriend over me, then read my resignation letter. It was the kind of overcast morning that made everything look like it had a thin film of dust on it. Gray sky, gray sidewalks, gray shirt. My reflection in the window of the building's front door was a smudge blurred by sleep and something I still couldn't name. I remember checking the time on my phone right before I stepped into the lobby, 9:54 a.m., 6 minutes early. I always aimed for 6 minutes. 5 was too obvious. 7 made people think you were trying too hard. 6 was just, oh, enough. The elevator smelled like recycled air and someone's too sweet body spray. The same kind of smell that clings to you all day the way some regrets do. I rode it alone, watching the floors blink by too slowly. I should have taken the stairs. I wanted the burn in my legs, the distraction of breathlessness. But I stood still and let myself rise like something weightless and unwilling. I already knew something was off. You can feel it in your bones before it reaches your skin. The silence when I walked past the front desks. No casual morning Tyler from reception. No stale chatter from the break room. Just that heavy, anticipatory hush like a storm pressing against the windows before the rain starts. Angela was already in the conference room when I walked in. And she always was. She had her hair up, twisted in that way that made her look elegant and severe all at once. I used to love that look, said it made her neck look like something carved from marble. She used to laugh when I said things like that. A real laugh, not the polite, clipped one she started using after we separated, after she became my manager. She didn't look up when I entered. Her eyes were on a notepad, brows furrowed in concentration. I stood in the doorway for a second longer than I needed to, taking her in like a punch I knew was coming. And then I saw him. God, even his name tasted sour in my mouth. He was slouched in the chair beside her, one arm flung lazily over the backrest like he owned the place. He didn't belong in a room like this. Not in that seat, not in that tailored blazer that didn't quite fit right, not in the company, not in her life. And yet there he was, as always, where he shouldn't be and where I once had been. I sat across from them, keeping my face neutral, my body language easy. Years of marriage had trained me well in hiding discomfort. I placed my notebook on the table, uncapped a pen, and waited. Angela looked up finally, eyes sharp, unreadable. "Thanks for coming, Tyler," she said, like I had a choice. Like my calendar hadn't been mysteriously cleared for this exact window, like I wasn't sitting there trying to keep my stomach from folding in on itself. She jumped straight in, no small talk, no preamble, just the facts. Her voice was flat, polished, almost rehearsed. "We're moving forward with the department restructure. The board signed off this morning." I nodded, kept my face blank. I'd heard rumors, sure, reassignments, budget shifts, but I'd stayed out of it. Done my work, led my team, stayed clean. I'd been with the company for 7 years, 3 in this department. Built processes from scratch, salvaged chaotic projects, mentored the interns no one else had the patience for. I'd been playing the long game, waiting for the senior project manager role to open. And when it did, I was ready. Everyone said it was mine. Except, apparently, everyone didn't include Angela. "We've decided to give the role to Kurt." The moment cracked like a windshield spidering under pressure. It didn't shatter outright, but I could feel the webbing of shock crawling outward, branching into disbelief, confusion, and then something sharper. She didn't even flinch when she said it, didn't soften the blow, just dropped it on the table like a stapler, like it was nothing. Kurt leaned forward, his grin crooked and full of teeth. "Big shoes to fill, man. I'm looking forward to building on the work you've done." I wanted to lunge across the table. Not physically, I'm not a violent man, but emotionally, spiritually. I wanted to grab Angela by the truth and shake her until it spilled out of her mouth. Why him? Why the man who used to loiter in our kitchen in pajama pants, hungover and playing indie records I hated? Why the man who told me at a Christmas party 3 years ago that corporate life is just another form of slow suicide? Why the man who stole my wife before I even realized I'd lost her? I swallowed the questions like gravel. I didn't look at her. I looked at my notebook, then my hands, then the wall. Anything but her face. Anything but those eyes I once knew so well, now hollowed out and professional. She kept talking, words like transition period, mentorship, knowledge transfer. I couldn't tell if she was speaking to me or performing for him. Maybe both, maybe neither. I tuned most of it out. What I couldn't tune out was the heat rising up my spine. Not anger, not yet, something sadder, something deeper. Like I'd been gently erased, and the space where I used to be had already been filled in with someone else's handwriting. "You'll stay on in your current role, of course," she said. "We'll need your leadership as we make this shift." That's when I looked at her, and that's when I saw it. Not regret, not pride, not even discomfort. Just a flicker of something like disappointment, like she expected more from me, like I was being unreasonable by not clapping for my replacement. I smiled, I don't know why, maybe because it was the only thing left that was mine in that room. My dignity, my stillness, my ability to make a decision in silence. I stood slowly, the chair scraped against the floor, shrill and final. "Thank you for the update," I said. My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't clench. I walked out without another word, down the hallway lined with posters about innovation and teamwork, past the smiling receptionist, past the elevator. I took the stairs this time. I counted each step, 32 floors. My legs burned halfway through, but I kept going, kept climbing down like descending into something real again. At my desk, I didn't speak to anyone. I opened a blank Word document. "I resign." In 2 words. Then I kept typing, not fast, not fevered, just slow and deliberate, like bleeding in cursive. I wrote about betrayal, about watching the same person hurt you twice in 2 completely different ways. I wrote about the indignity of staying silent, about what it means to be invisible in a place you helped build. I wrote until the words stopped coming. Oh, and then I printed it, signed it, left it on Angela's desk without a note, and walked out into the gray afternoon where everything looked like it had been drained of color, except for me. I was buzzing, numb and awake, like someone stepping out of anesthesia into pain, but also into clarity. Something had broken, and in the quiet, I could finally hear it. The first thing I noticed after walking out of that office building was how loud the city actually is when you don't have anywhere to be. The cars, the chatter, the hum of life continuing without your permission. I stood on the sidewalk for what felt like 10 minutes, watching people pass like they were all in on some script I hadn't been handed. It was just past noon, a Tuesday. The world spun on like it always does, indifferent to whatever tiny war just ended inside me. I took the long way home, walked through neighborhoods I hadn't seen since Angela and I used to take Sunday morning walks with paper cups of coffee and too many shared silences. I passed the corner deli where she once broke down crying because the tomatoes looked bruised and she was tired and we were pretending everything was fine. I passed the bookstore we used to escape to on rainy weekends, where we played this dumb game of picking out titles for each other and pretending to psychoanalyze one another like we were strangers. Back then, the silence between us still had the potential to be comfortable. Now it just echoed. I didn't go back to the apartment we once shared, the one she moved out of 2 years ago with a box of sweaters and the hand-carved bowl we got in Santa Fe. I had moved after the divorce. The new place was smaller, colder, a one-bedroom that came partially furnished and fully indifferent to me. It was a space meant for someone in transition. I just didn't realize I still was. That first day, I didn't do much except sit on the edge of my bed with my shoes still on, wondering if the weight in my chest was heartbreak or ego. Maybe both. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just sat there, staring at a crack in the ceiling like it held the answer to a question I hadn't yet dared to ask. That night I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't shut up. It kept replaying Angela's voice in that room, the way she said Kurt's name like it didn't cost her anything. The way he leaned in, smug and settled, like the seat had always been his. I wondered if she kissed him that morning, if she whispered, "You've got this," before he left their apartment, our old apartment. I wondered if she ever thought about how it would feel sitting across from me telling me I wasn't enough. Not as a husband, not as a leader, not as a man. The days blurred after that. I stopped checking the time. I didn't shower unless I needed to go to the store. I kept thinking I should feel something bigger, more cinematic. But mostly I felt like someone had quietly removed all the furniture from my life and left me with the echo of my own voice. Emails came in, first from HR. Then from my team, confused, worried, professional concern barely masking gossip. I didn't reply. What could I say? That my ex-wife gave the job I earned to the man she left me for. That I sat through it and nodded like a good little soldier. That I wrote a resignation letter not out of spite, but because I couldn't bear the idea of staying one more second in a world where that kind of thing could happen without consequence. I started writing again, not anything good, just pages and pages of raw, unfiltered thoughts. Stream of consciousness, half-finished sentences, things I couldn't say out loud without choking on them. I filled legal pads with lists of mistakes, of things I should have said, of what I gave up for a title I never got. I wrote out memories like I was trying to exhume them, examine them under a microscope. The night I found Kurt's text on her phone. The way she denied it, then admitted it, then cried like I was the one who hurt her. I cooked eggs most mornings, scrambled, simple, something about stirring something in a pan made me feel in control. I drank too much coffee and not enough water. I stopped opening blinds. The apartment stayed dim and still, a place where time was optional. 3 weeks in, I realized I hadn't spoken to another human being in almost 4 days. That's when I wandered downtown. It wasn't planned, I just started walking. No music, no phone, just the sound of my steps on pavement and the occasional honk that startled me out of whatever spiral I'd slipped into. The bookstore glowed like a memory. Tucked between a diner and a flower shop, it looked too gentle for the world. I hadn't been in since before the divorce. I didn't even know if it was still open. But the door gave easily under my hand, and the bell above it rang out like a soft kind of welcome. It smelled like paper and time. She was stocking the psychology shelf, I remember that clearly. Her hair was short, choppy, like she cut it herself with conviction. She wore a faded flannel and had a pencil tucked behind her ear. I wasn't trying to talk to her. I just needed to hear someone else's voice. Hey, I said, my voice like gravel. Do you know if you have that book about grief, the one with the yellow cover? She turned, glanced at me. You'll need to be a little more specific. Half the grief section has yellow covers. I smiled, first time in days. She raised an eyebrow. You okay? And I said something like, not really, but I'm not trying to make it worse. We ended up talking about books at first, then about grief. She said her name was Helen, that she lost someone last year, her brother, car accident. We talked about how grief isn't linear, how it's a spiral staircase. You keep coming back to the same places, just a little higher or lower than the last time. We stood in that aisle for an hour, maybe more. Time started again. When the store closed, I walked her to her building. A quiet walk, no flirting, just a kind of mutual understanding that we were two people floating in the aftermath of something. At her door, she said, "You look like someone who's trying to remember what living feels like." And I said, "I think I just did." That night, I dreamed of Angela, but not the Angela from the boardroom. It was the younger version, barefoot in our old kitchen, making pancakes at midnight and humming some song I never learned the name of. She didn't say anything in the dream, just looked at me. And I didn't feel angry or sad, just done. The worst part of grief isn't the pain. It's the silence that comes after, when you realize the pain is no longer sharp, when you start to forget their laugh, their voice, the sound of their keys in the door. That's when you know something's really over. And that's when you begin. It happened by accident. I hadn't meant to go near the building again. I told myself I didn't care enough to haunt the past like that, to wander around the place where I once mattered, hoping to catch the scent of something that might make sense of it all. But grief is strange. It moves in sideways, always disguised as something else. I was walking downtown, no real purpose. Just a vague need to be somewhere other than my apartment. I'd been feeling better, or at least less numb. A couple of mornings ago, I caught myself humming while making coffee. That scared me a little. I didn't trust the lightness yet, didn't know if it was real or just another layer of the fog lifting. So I walked, ended up near the financial district. Somewhere beneath the buzz of construction and lunch break chatter, I heard my name in my head the way Angela used to say it when she needed something. "Tyler, can you..." "Tyler, don't forget. Tyler, let's not make a thing out of this." And before I knew it, I was pushing through the revolving door of that building, back into the world where I was once somebody's husband, somebody's mentor, somebody worth emailing back. I told myself I was just going to pick up my final tax document. HR refused to send it digitally for some infuriating bureaucratic reason. They were on the 15th floor. Angela's office was on the 17th. I should have taken the elevator directly to 15. Instead, I pressed 17. It was stupid, I knew it, but grief isn't logical. I don't know what I wanted, to see her, to look her in the eye and see if there was anything left, to confirm she had moved on completely so I could stop imagining she had. The hallway hadn't changed. Same off-white walls, same framed posters about workplace synergy. I passed by the project management bullpen where I used to sit. Someone else was at my old desk. A man in his 20s, clean-cut, focused. I felt nothing, just a kind of distant recognition, like seeing an old coat in someone else's closet. Angela's office door was cracked open, and there she was. She looked older, tired maybe, hair still perfect, makeup subtle. She was alone. Sitting at her desk with a piece of paper in her hands, her brow furrowed like she was doing math in her head. It was my letter. I froze in the doorway. She didn't notice me at first. She was rereading a paragraph, one near the end, I think. I remembered writing that part late at night, drunk on truth and ready to set the bridge on fire. I'd said something like, "You taught me how to disappear in plain sight. I won't thank you for that, but I will remember it." She exhaled through her nose, not a sigh, not quite, something more complicated, and then she wiped her eye with the side of her hand, one slow movement, she didn't even seem aware of it. I knocked lightly, and she looked up. For a moment, neither of us said a word. We just stared, blinking, two ghosts standing in the same dimension for the first time in months. She didn't pretend to smile, I appreciated that. "Tyler," she said, her voice was quiet, not brittle, just real. I stepped in, closed the door gently behind me, didn't mean to interrupt. She looked down at the letter again, then folded it once and set it on the desk like it had weight. "I didn't think I'd see you again. I didn't think I'd want to see you again." She nodded, that soft, understanding nod women give when they've already calculated 5 outcomes before you open your mouth. "You still write like you did in college," she said. "Sharp, like you're peeling skin, not just paper." "I didn't write it for style." "I know." Silence again, but not awkward, heavy. She leaned back in her chair, stared at the ceiling like she was trying to find something in the tiles. "You really hated me that much?" she asked. I laughed just once, it was dry. "No, that's the problem. I didn't hate you enough, I should have. Might have saved us both a lot of time." Her eyes came back down to meet mine, and they didn't flinch this time. "I never meant to hurt you like that. You just did it anyway." "I was unhappy," she said, like that was a complete sentence, like that explained betrayal. "You weren't seeing me anymore. Maybe because every time I looked, you were already somewhere else." We didn't yell, we didn't cry. That was the strange part. There was no movie moment. Just two people sitting in the ruins of something they once believed in, sorting through the rubble with their bare hands. "I didn't promote him to spite you," she said after a while. "I didn't even think about it like that." I looked at her then, really looked. She meant it, that was the worst part. "You didn't think about me at all," I said. She closed her eyes, then nodded slowly. "I thought you'd stay like always." That broke something in me. Because she was right, I'd stayed for years in a marriage where I wasn't loved anymore. I stayed in a job that had stopped valuing me. I stayed in conversations where I wasn't heard. I stayed in silences that stung. I stayed and stayed and stayed, thinking endurance was the same thing as love. "I stayed long enough to forget who I was," I said. "I'm not proud of that." She looked away. I could see it in her posture, that subtle bend in her shoulders. Shame, regret, or maybe just exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And for the first time, I believed her. But I didn't forgive her. I didn't need to. There's a moment when the pain stops being about the other person. When it stops being about revenge or answers or closure, it just becomes part of the story you carry, like a healed wound, still tender in the right light, but no longer open. I stood up. Goodbye, Angela. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. I walked out without turning back. Down the hallway, down the elevator, out of the building and into the sunlight I hadn't noticed in weeks. The city hadn't changed, it never does, but I had. There's no final line in real life, no score swell, just a body moving forward carrying a little less weight than before. There wasn't a defining moment where I woke up and thought, it's better now. Healing didn't arrive like an epiphany, it came like slow rain on a roof, so gentle you barely noticed the sound at first. It came through repetition. Small things, eggs, the right song at the right time, a quiet Saturday that didn't feel like punishment. I started working at a print shop about 6 weeks after I walked out of Angela's office for the last time. It was a hole-in-the-wall kind of place owned by an old guy named Vince who didn't ask too many questions and seemed genuinely glad to have someone who knew how to format a PDF without crashing the system. The pay was humble. The air smelled like toner and cardboard. I liked it immediately. There was something grounding about the tactile nature of the work. Paper had weight, ink had texture, everything I touched reminded me I was still here. I'd spent so long in a world where things were abstract, metrics, projections, meetings about meetings. Now I stacked things, I cut things. I stood back and looked at the final product and thought, I made this. Nobody cared who I had been before, nobody asked, I didn't offer. They called me Ty, and that felt like a new pair of shoes I was breaking in, still a little stiff but mine. My apartment stayed the same, small, imperfect, peeling a little at the corners, but I started opening the blinds again, I started making the bed. I bought a plant from the farmer's market, a fern I didn't know how to take care of, I named it Jules. It started dying almost immediately, but I kept watering it anyway. Sometimes I talked to it, it sounds dumb, but it helped. Helen and I kept seeing each other. No expectations, no labels. She'd text me a book recommendation and I'd send her a photo of a weird customer receipt I found funny. We met for coffee every Sunday. Always the same cafe, always the same table by the window. Some weeks we barely talked, just sat and read and shared a cookie. Other times we cracked each other open without warning. I told her things I hadn't said aloud in years. I think I wanted to be chosen more than I actually wanted to be loved, I confessed once, stirring my coffee like it held the answer. And when I wasn't chosen, I didn't know what was left of me. Helen didn't rush to fix it. She just nodded and said, yeah, that's the kind of thing that takes a while to come back from. I liked that she didn't try to clean it up for me. One night we walked back to her building under a soft spring rain, the kind that makes everything smell like dirt and newness. We didn't kiss, she didn't invite me in. But she took my hand and held it for a long time outside her door. That was enough. I was learning how to be okay with enough. Some mornings I still woke up in a panic, sure I was late for something. Some nights I'd dream of the office, of Angela's voice or Kurt's face or the click of my old keyboard. But they weren't nightmares, just echoes, distant enough not to hurt anymore. I stopped checking LinkedIn, stopped comparing myself to people I didn't even like. I let myself grieve the version of me I thought I'd be, the one with the fancy title and the corner office and the glass awards gathering dust. He's gone now, and the strange thing is I don't miss him. I go on long walks, no destination, no timeline, just me and the sound of my shoes on the pavement and the occasional nod from a stranger. I started taking pictures again, not for anyone, just little things that caught my eye, a crooked mailbox, a kid feeding pigeons, the shadow of a bicycle on the sidewalk at sunset. It's not a movie, there's no montage, just life, quiet, ordinary, but mine. One afternoon, I found the resignation letter again while cleaning out a drawer. I read it. I expected to feel fire again, some deep-bellied righteous anger, but I didn't. I just felt clear, like reading an old journal entry from a version of yourself who was drowning. I folded it back up, didn't throw it away, just tucked it into a box with other pieces of pain I've outgrown. The fern, Jules, is still mostly dead. But there's one new frond. Green, small, curled like a fist. I don't know if it'll last, but I water it anyway. And maybe that's the point.